Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayh. Wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu. Wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah wahdahu la sharika lahu. Wa nashhadu anna Muhammadan 'abduhu wa rasuluhu. Arsalahu bihaqqi bashiran wa nadhiran bayna yaday as-sa'ah. من يطع الله ورسوله فقد رشد واهتدى ومن يعص الله ورسوله فقد غوى أما بعد فقال الله تعالى في القرآن العظيم والفرقان الحميد كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله وقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في الحديث ما من يوم أكثر من أن يعتق الله فيه عبدا من النار وقال صوم يوم عرفة أحتسب على الله أن يكفر السنة التي قبله والتي بعده وقال إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى فمن كانت هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله فمن كانت هجرته إلى دنيا يصيبها أو إلى امرأة ينكحها فهجرته ما هاجر إليه وقال في مكان آخر كل المسلم على المسلم حرام دمه وماله وعرضه صدق الله العظيم وصدق رسوله الكريم وأنا على ذلك من الشاهدين. My dear brothers and sisters, today, as all of you are aware, is the day of Arafah. It is the most auspicious day of the 10 most auspicious days in the Muslim calendar, which makes it the most virtuous day of the year. In this sense, it is the counterpart to Laylatul Qadr, which is the most virtuous night of the year. And there are many virtues associated with this day. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam says that fasting on this day is equivalent to expiating the sins of the past year and the year that's going to follow. يُكَفِّرُ السَّنَةَ الَّتِي قَبْلَهُ وَالَّتِي بَعْدَهُ. And he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emancipates more of his servants on this day from the fire of hell than on any other day. ما من يوم أكثر من أن يعتق الله فيه عبدا من النار. This is the day on which he emancipates most of his servants from the fire of hell. We are all aware of the virtues of this day. So rather than go down the well-trodden path of extolling the myriad virtues of this day, what I would rather do is to focus on the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not forgive even on this day. What are the acts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not forgive even at times like these? And in this regard, I would like to talk about Huqooq al-Ibaad, the rights that human beings have upon one another. For as we are all aware, in Islam we have this bifurcation, we have this division between Huqooq Allah and Huqooq al-Ibaad, between the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the rights that He has upon us, the right to worship Him, the right to follow His commands, to refrain from the things He has forbidden for us. These are Huqooq Allah. They are the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And on a day like this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgoes His own rights. He forgives violations against these rights, shortcomings in these rights, in the fulfillment of these rights, because He is Ar-Rahmanur Rahimeen, because He is the most compassionate. He is the most merciful. And we have this expectation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He will forgive us our shortcomings. But when it comes to Huqooq al-Ibaad, this is one arena in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not interfere, in which He does not intervene, because these are not His rights. It is the rights of your fellow man. And such is the emphasis on these rights that Imam al-Qurtubi writes in his magisterial commentary of the Quran, that on the bridge of Sirat, there is one portion of that bridge that is dedicated solely to Huqooq al-Ibaad. When we have to cross this bridge, which is sharper than a sword, thinner than a hair, that there is one portion that is dedicated to Huqooq al-Ibaad, and if we have violated anyone's rights, we're not making it across to Jannah. So this is what I would like to focus on today. The rights that we have upon one another. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, كُلُّ مُسْلِمِ عَلَى الْمُسْلِمِ عِبَادٌ كُلُّ مُسْلِمِ عَلى الْمُسْلِمِ حَرَامٌ دَمُهُ وَمَالُهُ وَعِرْضُهُ. There are three inalienable rights that Muslims have. These are that his blood is sacrosanct. You cannot spill his blood. That his wealth is sacrosanct. You cannot take his wealth unrightfully. And that his honor is sacrosanct. You cannot disparage him. And it is the last of these that I want to focus on today. Because we see the emphasis on Huqooq al-Ibaad in the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam once asked the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, أَتَدْرُونَ مَا الْمُفْلِسِ أَتَدْرُونَ مَا الْمُفْلِسِ. Do you know what the definition of a bankrupt or a penniless and insolvent person is? The Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum replied, الْمُفْلِسُ فِينَا مَنْ لَا دِرْهَمَ لَهُ وَلَا مَتَاعَ. That the definition of a penniless, a bankrupt person, according to us, is someone who doesn't have any wealth nor any possessions. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam corrected them. He said that the bankrupt person is the person who appears on the day of judgment and he has salah, he has siyam, he has zakah. In other words, he has fulfilled Huqooq Allah. He has fulfilled the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he's swore at such and such a person. He's slandered such and such a person. He's spilled the blood of yet another person. He's hit yet another person. He's consumed such another person's wealth. So, what happens? All of these people will exact their rights, will take from his Sawm, from his Salah, from his Zakah, from all of his good deeds. And they will take and they will take until there's nothing left. And when there's nothing left, they will pile on their misdeeds, their sins onto this person. And he will be thrown into the fire of Jahannam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, this is bankruptcy. This is the definition of bankruptcy. In other words, moral bankruptcy. That's what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was referring to. That's what true bankruptcy is. And it is in this regard that we fall short. And we are well aware of the rights that each of us have upon one another, both Muslim and non-Muslim. Right? We're aware that we're not supposed to slander our Muslim brother, or hit our Muslim sister, or consume the wealth of another Muslim person. We're aware of these rights. What we are less aware of are other rights that people have upon us. And this is what makes it more egregious and more dangerous and more pernicious. Because the rights that we are not aware of, and the rights that we are not aware that we are not fulfilling, that makes it very dangerous, because we don't seek forgiveness for that and we're not pardoned for that. So what are these rights to which I refer? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, "Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas." You are the best nation to emerge for mankind, for people, linnas. Why is that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives three reasons. تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ. You command the good, you forbid the evil, and you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, this sequence of attributes should give us pause. The three defining features of this ummah, the three reasons that we are afforded this honorific of being khayru ummah, the best ummah. Right? The sequence in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lists this should give us pause. Why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar before belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? When everyone agrees that commanding the good, forbidding the evil is not beneficial if someone doesn't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That the benefits of al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar accrue from and are predicated on belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why mention that last? Why not mention belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first? And Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi, in his intimidatingly erudite tafsir, Mafatih al-Ghaib, asks this very question. He says, لِمَا قَدِّمُوا الْأَمْرُ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَالنَّهْيُ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ عَلَى الْإِيمَانِ بِاللَّهِ. Why is it that commanding the good and forbidding the evil has been mentioned before belief in Allah? And he answers that it's because المؤثر في حصول هذه الخيرية هو الأمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر. That the reason that we are given this honorific of being khayr ummah is that we command the good and forbid the evil. That belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was a requisite for every ummah, was a requirement for every ummah. What sets us apart, what our distinguishing feature is that we command good and we forbid evil. And it is in this that there's an intimation of the awesome responsibility of al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahyu 'anil munkar. That this is our defining feature, and it's what sets us apart. And the reason that it's an awesome responsibility, and the reason it's so difficult, if done correctly, is that it is innately a selfless act. In this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking us to go against our very nature. Human beings, by their very nature, are egotistical. Their very nature, their nature is self-preservation. What's going to benefit me? What's in it for me? It's all about self-interest. We are innately selfish beings. Al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahyu 'anil munkar, commanding the good and forbidding the evil, is intrinsically a selfless act. It's an altruistic act. Here, if done correctly, you are showing concern not for yourself, but for your Muslim brother, for your Muslim sister. That's why you're doing it. It's going against our very nature, which is why it's such a difficult thing to do. And we see this in the example of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum. So I ask, why is it that when the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, when they did al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahyu anil munkar, when they commanded the good and forbade the evil, that they melted the hearts of their most inveterate enemies, their staunchest foes, their hearts would melt. They would accept Islam. Why is it that when we do al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahyu anil munkar, we can't even have an effect on our closest friends and family? What's the difference? And I submit that the reason the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum had such an effect on everyone around them was because they did al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahyu anil munkar out of genuine concern for their fellow man. That was their only objective. A deep and sincere care and concern for their fellow human being. That's why it had such an effect. We as human beings, on a cellular level, we respond to someone who truly cares about us, who has our best interests at heart. We respond to that. And so, when the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum did amr bil ma'ruf wa nahyu anil munkar, they had an incredible effect on people. Conversely, when we do al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahyu anil munkar, why is it that we don't have an effect? Because when we do it, we don't do it out of a sense of concern. We don't do it because we care about the other person. No. We do it out of a sense of superiority. Because we think we're better than the person that we're telling. And so we're not doing it out of concern. We're doing it out of judgment. Our amr bil ma'ruf wa nahyu anil munkar is saturated with judgment. And nobody likes to be judged. So, people intrinsically reject it. They turn away from it. It has the opposite effect. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, "Bashiru wa la tunaffiru." That give glad tidings. Bashara means, it comes from bashara, complexion. Because when you show genuine concern for someone, right, you can see on their complexion. You can see on their face. When you give someone glad tidings, when you draw them in to Islam, you can see on their face. This is what al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahyu anil munkar is meant to be. The way we do it, because we want to feel superior to someone else. Right? We have the opposite effect. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, وَلَا تُنَفِّرُوا. Don't scare people off. That's what tunaffiru is. When you scare off animals, for example. We're scaring people off. We're turning them away from Islam. We're putting them off Islam. Because of the way we're doing it. Because the only reason we're telling someone to do this or to do that. When in the masjid we see someone else doing something a little bit differently. We can't wait to tell them, oh, this is wrong. Even though, according to one of the earliest jurists, Sufyan al-Thawri, who had his own madhab, it is not permissible to tell anyone not to do something if in any of the madhahib it's acceptable. So unless you're one of these people who has an intimate knowledge of every madhab, of every school of thought, it is not permissible for you to say that. So this is the reason we do it. Because we want to feel superior. Because we want to satisfy our own ego. When you tell a woman to dress a certain way, why are you doing it? Is it out of concern? Or is it because you want to feel superior? You want to satiate your ego? Because if that's the reason you're doing it, that means you're putting that person off Islam. And we see in the example of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum that whenever they did al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahyu 'anil munkar, their mentality was always that this person that I'm calling to Islam is better than I am. That they have qualities, attributes that I don't have. How can they be saved? How can they achieve salvation? Right? Asa an yakunu khayrun minhum. Maybe it's that they're better than you. You don't know. That was their mentality. They approached it from a position of humility. And that's why they had such an awesome effect on people. When we do it, we're doing it because we want to feel superior. And that's why it doesn't have any effect. We see that whenever the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum did anything, they interrogated their nafs. It is a reason. There's a reason Imam al-Bukhari begins his Sahih with إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that actions are but by their intentions. That all actions are predicated on the intention. This is why whenever they did anything, they would interrogate their intention. Before they did the act, whilst they were doing the act, after they did the act. حَاسِبُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ قَبْلَ أَن تُحَاسَبُوا. That was their mantra. Take account of yourselves before you are taken account of. Take account of every intention, of every deed. Why did he do it? Why did he do al-amr bil ma'ruf? Was it out of genuine concern? Or was it to feel superior? And examples abound in the life of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum. We see, for example, that on the battlefield, Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu had the enemy in his sights and he was about to vanquish him, when the man spat in his face. Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu withdrew. The man asked him, "You had me in your sights. Why did you let me go?" He said that when I first was about to vanquish you, I was doing it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you spat in my face, I wanted to seek revenge for that. And that is not acceptable. So I withdrew. This is what we need to do. We need to interrogate our every intention, our every act of amr bil ma'ruf wa nahyu 'anil munkar, in order to be rightful recipients of the honorific of khayru ummah. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi nujumi huda. قال الله تعالى في القرآن العظيم إن في ذلك لعبرة لأولي الأبصار. وقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا ينبغي لعبد أن يقول أنا خير من يونس من متى. وقال في مكان آخر أنا خير ولد آدم ولا فخر. صدق الله العظيم وصدق رسوله الكريم. So we see countless examples in the life of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum about how to do al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahyu 'anil munkar. And indeed, we see an example for this in Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam himself, who is our uswatun hasana. He is a beautiful example that we seek to emulate, that we seek to follow. One time Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said to his companions, لا ينبغي لعبد أن يقول, it does not behove a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to say, أنا خير من يونس من متى, that I, as in Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, is better than Yunus bin Matta, who is Yunus alayhi salatu wasalam. Now, we are all familiar with the story of Yunus alayhi salatu wasalam, that he called his people to Islam. And they rejected it. So he informed them that the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would descend upon them. And he left. Without being told, he left. He was hasty. After he left, his people sought forgiveness. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave them. But because Yunus alayhi salatu wasalam left before being commanded to leave, he was subjected to the trial of the whale. And he was swallowed up by the whale, and he sought forgiveness in the belly of the whale, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave him. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam says that it is not appropriate for any believer to say that he, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, is better than Yunus alayhi salatu wasalam. And yet, at another time, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that أَنَا خَيْرُ وُلْدِ آدَمْ وَلَا فَخْرٍ, that I am the leader of the children of Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. I am the leader of mankind, وَلَا فَخْرٍ. And this is not vainglory. This is not out of pride that I am saying this. This is a fact. So, there seems to be a dichotomy between these two things. On the one hand, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is saying, don't say that I'm better than Yunus alayhi salam. On the other hand, he's saying that I am the best of mankind. What are we to make of this? The Shura al-Hadith give multiple explanations. Maybe it is that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said what he said before he knew that he's the best of mankind. Maybe he said it because he wanted to teach his ummah. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was Jawami'ul Kalim. He was given consummate concision. Everything he said had multiple meanings, had deep wisdom. So it's probably a mixture of all these factors. The reason that resonates most with me, however, is that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said this, that he was not to be said to be better than Yunus alayhi salam, because he didn't want praise for himself to be predicated on criticism of someone else. He didn't want people to say that he is better because Yunus alayhi salam made this mistake. He didn't want to be propped up by putting someone else down. This is what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is teaching us. And this is what we do when we do al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahyu 'anil munkar, in order to make ourselves feel superior, in order to make ourselves feel better. We do it at the expense of someone else. We do it at the expense of making someone else feel bad. We make ourselves feel better by making someone else feel worse. We don't do it out of concern, like the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum did, like Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam did. And this is the difference. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَعِبْرَةٌ لِأُولِي الْأَبْصَارِ. What is the difference between the Judaic faith and Islam? One of the key general differences is that in Judaism there is an overemphasis on ritualism and formalism, on just carrying out the rituals and the acts of the religion. Islam is not like that. In Islam, every act that we do has a significance. And we are supposed to make that journey to that inner meaning. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَعِبْرَةٌ لِأُولِي الْأَبْصَارِ. Surely in it is ibrah, wisdom, for those of insight. Ibrah, the word for wisdom, ibrah, comes from the root abara, to traverse, to make the journey. Because here you're making the journey from the zahir meaning, from the ostensible meaning, to the inner dimension, the inner wisdom, and that's palpitating beneath it. Every act that you do, every act that the Hujjaj are doing right now, they're not just empty ritualistic acts. No, every act has a hidden meaning, an inner meaning that we as Muslims are supposed to be cognizant of. that we are supposed to make this journey from the outer meaning, the outer act, to the inner dimension of that, so that we can be rightful recipients of the honorific خير أمة. قال الله تعالى في القرآن العظيم وفرقان حميد: إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا ونبينا مولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ونبينا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، له الملك وله الحمد وهو على كل شيء قدير. اللهم لا مانع لما أعطيت ولا معطي لما منعت ولا ينفع ذا الجد منك الجد. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من الهرم والعجز والكسل والبخل وعذاب القبر. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من علم لا ينفع ومن قلب لا يخشع ومن نفس لا تشبع ومن دعوة لا يستجاب لها. اللهم آتي نفسي تقواها وزكها أنت خير من زكاها أنت وليها ومولاها. اللهم أصلح لي ديني الذي هو عصمة أمري، واصلح لي دنيانا التي فيها معاشي، واصلح لي آخرتي التي فيها معادي، واجعل الحياة زيادة لي من كل خير، واجعل الموت راحة لي من كل شر. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا إنك جامع الناس ليوم لا ريب فيه إن الله لا يخلف الميعاد. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا واخطأنا. ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا. ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين، فانصرنا على القوم الفاسقين، فانصرنا على القوم الظالمين، فانصرنا على القوم المنافقين، فانصرنا على القوم الضالين. ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. ربنا إنك من تدخل النار فقد أخزيته ما للظالمين من أنصار. ربنا إننا سمعنا مناديا ينادي للإيمان أن آمنوا بربكم فآمنا. ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وأقم الصلاة.